Welcome to another edition of TSA Safety Matters. I'm your host, Greg Kerr from Stakeholder Relations. And today we're with Mike Adams, the Director of Boilers and Pressure Vessels and Operating Engineers, for a few thoughts on what's happening in the industry and TSA's role in safety across the province. So thanks for being with us today, Mike.
My pleasure, Greg. I'm glad to be here again.
Excellent. Now, I know that you are steadfast and you work hard on meeting all the safety requirements that are part of both programs that you deal with.
Yes.
But one of the interesting aspects behind that, in terms of keeping up to speed, is you do regulatory review and code adoption documents to make sure that all the regulations fit what are the up and coming issues or positive directions in the industry.
That's right, Greg. We've just finished updating our boilers and pressure vessels code adoption document. It went out for public review a few months ago. We received some very good feedback, and the public even found one correction to what we were proposing, so that's being incorporated now. So now we're just waiting to get it approved by the minister before we officially adopt the latest codes and standards for the BPV regulation.
Mm-hmm. What was the one suggestion that was?
Well, we mentioned the required inspections, but we forgot the word annual.
Ah.
So it wasn't critical, but it was a corrections, and we were glad that someone pointed that out for us.
Now, there's some other code adoption documents that are happening in other sort of industries that TSA regulates.
Yeah.
What's the connection?
Well, there's one of the connections is with the propane regulation. In particular for automotive use, there's a B149, which is the propane regulation, and the BPV regulation, B51, has an Annex G in it that also addresses the automotive propane. Before these propane tanks become part of the fuels regulation, they're constructed under the BPV regulation. So we have to make sure that B51 is synchronized with the propane regulation. So now, right now, they just updated the propane regulation, and now that the fuels group has officially adopted that regulation, we can now use that to overwrite the changes in the BPV regulation. So allowing us to keep in step with the code and standards, even though we do not adopt the propane standard,
Mm-hmm.
we can refer to the fuels division adopting it.
Another legal requirement.
Yes.
that exists. Now, the germane point is on the PSI, correct?
Yeah, the design pressure. The design pressure is changed from having to be 312 PSIG to the new version is 312 or greater.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows more flexibility for the manufacturers. And we could not go by that because the B51 regulation still has equal to 312. Now that fuels has adopted the new code, we can refer to that and now accept higher pressures for design.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yes, it is.
So you've also been through an extensive consultation with the Boilers and Pressure Vessels regulation, the regulatory review that's involved in that.
Yes, we have. It's been a long process. We've had the BPV expert panel. We've had which generated a report, which is now public domain, and there were 5 recommendations made in that BPV panel report. Those 5 issues are addressing the non-compliance with TSSA regarding TSA issuing the certificate of inspection for all the boilers, and pressure vessels. Right now, the insurers issue reports of inspection, and we treat those as certificates of inspection. But it's been reaffirmed that, and by industry, that TSA should be issuing all the certificates of inspection for all the boilers in Ontario. So we're now, that's in the proposal for the new regulation, and we're now looking at implementing the processes that will allow us to do that.
Well, we are the regulator.
That's right. So let's regulate. And the second issue was the structural deficit, BPV, and because our structure was designed to have a revenue part of from the certificate of inspection side, we've never incorporated that, so we've always been running in a deficit. Now we're going to fix that.
How do you mean structural deficit?
Structural deficit means that when TSSA was first convened, it was staffed for us to issue CFIs and collect a fee for those CFIs. Mm-hmm. So that was built into the original structure, the cost structure for the program. Since we've never implemented that component of that structure, that's why it's called a structural deficit. Mm-hmm. So now, once we start actually issuing the CFIs and collecting a minimal fee for that, that will address the structural deficit, and then that'll put the mandated part of BPV into cost recovery mode.
Yes.
The third issue is data challenges. Our install base is inadequate right now. We don't know how many boils and pressure vessels there are out there right now because the insurers inspect
most of the data.
The vast majority of the BPVs. So as the regulator, we don't know how many BPVs are out there and when they were last inspected. So that was one of the issues identified by the BPV expert panel, and we've been tasked now to rectify that. A fourth area is the oversight of the insurers and their periodic inspections. So we're now looking at working more closely with our insurer partners to be able to confirm that all the periodic inspections are being performed as required at the frequency stated in the code adoption document.
Mm-hmm. So that's sort of connected to your previous point in terms of making sure you get the data that you're required.
Yeah, everything's linked.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And the last one is there's some confusion about periodic inspections of piping and fittings. Right now the regulations say that piping and fitting should be periodic inspected. However, that was an oversight in the regulation. We've never required periodic inspections of piping and fittings. No other jurisdiction in North America requires periodic inspections of piping and fittings. So we've been asked to clarify that and to eliminate the confusion about whether or not they should be done.
Because they would be considered redundant, or the safeties, there's not a great safety concern there.
There's zero safety concern about it. Piping systems have a much higher safety factor built into them. Mm-hmm. Plus, and even if we were to require a periodic inspection of piping, it would be the insurers who would have to do the vast majority of those inspections.
Yeah.
So right now we do not see a safety requirement for those periodic inspections. Mm-hmm. Any of those organizations that have high hazard piping, they usually follow American Petroleum Institute standards, which does have a periodic inspection requirement for the high hazard piping that's in their plants, sort of like on refineries. Mm-hmm. But for the rest of the power plants in Ontario, we don't see a need for it.
Yeah.
So that's keeping us very busy on getting these changes in the regulation in place. The ministry, we're still targeting a 1 January 2018 to get these changes implemented, and then there will be a time lag in there to get everybody up to speed and before the requirements.
Review process as well.
Well, the review process will be happening this year. Mm-hmm. And then once the regulation gets released, then there will be a time period for everybody to adopt it.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't know yet how long that grace period will be yet, but we'll be determining that this year.
And some of the hard work that you've done here is also feeding the regulatory review for operating engineers.
Oh yes, it's one of those things, beware of what you wish for, because we were saying both the BPV and the OE regs needed to be modernized. Little did we know that we'd have to do both at the same time. So on the operating engineer regulatory review, we're about 6 months behind. It started 6 months behind the BPV reg. So we've just finished the OE expert panel process. We had 7 all-day meetings with OE stakeholders. It was 2 more days than we did for BPV. The report from the OE panel is being worked on right now, and it's due to be completed by the end of May. And that will eventually become also public domain information that will be available to anyone. Just like the BPV report is already in the public domain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're doing right now. The key thing about the OE regulatory review is to modernize the regulations so that we'll be able to keep up to date with changing technologies,
Mm-hmm.
and also to add a little bit more scientific rigor to how we are assessing the risk of the plants. There will we'll be looking at quantifying our thresholds for staffing of plants,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't see any major changes in that. Right now our plants are attended. About 22% of all the OE plants are attended, and I'm very confident that we've identified those plants that need to be attended as attended.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got one of the outcomes of the OE expert panel review is we've struck another OE task group to look at the risk-based the scientific aspects of how we want to classify our plants and determine which ones should be attended, and to add some scientific rigor to that analysis. And it's my expectation that the results will be very, very similar to where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do have a very safe program right now. We have virtually 0 incidents, and one thing we do not want to do is to put that in jeopardy.
Sure. Now, we are in fact the regulator. We are the regulator of the province, but we're also inspected
Yes.
periodically, and just went through the ASME audit.
Exactly. As Ontario's authorized inspection agency, we get audited by the American Society of Mechanical Engineering, ASME, every 3 years in order to maintain our certificate of kind of acceptance agreement or authorization. We tend to flip around for those definitions. But it's our authority to become an authorized inspection agency. And we need this especially for our nuclear work, because the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, they're the regulators for all the nuclear power plants and facilities in Ontario. And we are the authorized inspection agency of choice for the nuclear industry in Ontario. So we have to be audited ourselves, and that happened in April, the end of April, and that allows us to continue on as being the Ontario's nuclear authorized inspection agency for the next 3 years.
So what kind of things are they looking at when they do the audit?
Oh, they're looking at our quality. Well, first thing, our quality manual, because that's the heart of every quality program is the manual. So they go through our manual, make sure it's up to speed, it's up to date with all the new changes with the ASME code, and to confirm that we are following it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 3-day process, and like I say, by the time you folks are seeing this, we'll have. I expect that we'll be able to say we've passed it, and then we'll be carrying on for the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, the other boiler insurers for all the insurers, they have to go through the same audits as well, correct?
That's right. All the insurers who employ boiler inspectors also get audited every 3 years by the national board. And so they go through the same process. That's a code requirement, and basically, again, just like us, they review their manual and make sure they're following their manual, and they do that every 3 years, just like us.
Mm-hmm. But they don't do the nuclear. They're not authorized to do.
No,
nuclear.
we're the only AIA in Ontario authorized for construction. AIA Construction. All the other insurers, they're authorized inspection agency for in-service inspection. So they don't need to do it through ASME. They need to do it through they can do it through the national board. With us, we get ours through ASME, which automatically includes a national board certificate of acceptance.
Now, you've done a lot of work with Bruce Power, but now you're adding Darlington to the mix.
Well, actually, it's the other way around. Yeah. Basically, we've been working with the Darlington Refurb project to staff up their project. So we've created a new region with 6 new staff to support only the Darlington Refurb project. Now I've talked about this before, but now we are fully staffed up for those 6 positions. Unfortunately, it takes 18 months to get a BPV inspector nuclear qualified. So even though we've got people staffed up for the Darlington work, now we've got another 12 months to go before they're fully nuclear qualified. So it takes time, and that was one of the lessons learned from Darlington, is that we can't afford to wait till the last minute to tell us that they need nuclear qualified staff for their project. So we've been meeting with both Bruce Power and OPG, and they have shared lessons learned. And the good news is for Bruce Power is that they've got their refurbishment program to start in 2020, but they're starting now to start forming a new Region 6 for boilers and pressure vessels to support they call the MCR project for Bruce Power. And now we're just submitting our proposal on how we're going to create Region 6 and get it staffed up and qualified, so that when they need a full complement of TSSA inspectors, they will be ready. So that was one very good lesson learned between Darlington and Bruce Power, that Bruce Power is going to make sure that they've given us enough notice to get qualified.
I guess it takes such a long period of time because you're dealing with the full rigor of safety regulations associated with it, but it's also linked to the skills shortage that's in the industry as well.
It's not so much the skills, it's more the first, because in order to get nuclear qualified, there are several previous qualifications they have to get through to get their N endorsement. They need their in-service commission, they need their repair, they need their construction endorsement, and once they get their construction endorsement, they have to have a year's worth of experience. And plus before they can get their nuclear qualification. And all these endorsements require 1 or 2 week courses down in Columbus, Ohio. So it takes a while to get, that's why it takes so long to get endorsed from the national board, which is a mandated requirement from the CNSC.
Now, what you also give a lot of presentations to industry, and you do deal with some of the skills shortage issues.
Yes.
You've got a few coming up. What are you looking forward to?
Well, just in the next 2 months, I've got three presentations. One to the Energy Users Forum, which is a group of basic energy users looking for updates with what's on the horizon. My presentation for these next ones are called the BPVOE Regulatory Review, What's on the Horizon. So it gives people an idea of what's changing, what could change, what's not changing. And so the first one is for the Energy Users Forum. Then there's the annual meeting of the colleges, where we get together with all 7 TSSA certified colleges to discuss issues of the day. I've talked about that before.
Co-op placements that we've helped with before.
That's right. That's a success story. Yeah. So the next one is in Georgian College in May. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is the role that the unions can play in solving this problem. Instead of
solving the skills shortage issue.
The skills shortage. Instead of targeting the unions as being a cause of the problem, we want to bring them in and make them part of the solution to see what we can all do to facilitate co-op placements for college students, and then also other employment opportunities working within the various collective agreements. So it's going to be an interesting dialogue in Owen Sound in May when we try to tackle that.
Well, I don't think it'll be a problem in sort of inciting pride in the profession.
No.
It's just getting the younger generations interested. So.
Yes, and having them the opportunities to get interested.
Yes.
So that's something that
other than salary, because I think this is what they said, you can make a pretty penny as a power engineer.
Yes.
But I think it has to have that element of fascination with technology.
And also, people have to know about it.
Yes.
And the OE profession is a silent profession. One of the tasks we want to look at, and actually it's one of the recommendations in the OE expert panel, is to better market what OE is all about, and how do we get the word out of what the profession is and get more people interested. So yes, there's a lot of opportunities for how we can improve how we manage and promote the OE profession.
Mm-hmm. So you're also meeting with the Canadian Nuclear
Safety
Commission in the next while as well.
Yes, we just had a very good meeting with them. It's a regular meeting with all the licensee holders, Bruce Power, OPG, AECL, New Brunswick Power, and Hydro-Quebec, and also the authorized inspection agencies, TSSA, New Brunswick, and RBQ in Quebec. And the purpose is to just compare notes with how the authorized inspection agencies are supporting the licensee holders. And the good news is there were unanimous accolades for TSSA and how well TSSA supported Ontario's nuclear plants. Mm-hmm. So that was very good news. It's good news that we are doing a good job in supporting our nuclear clients, and we are continually looking for ways to improve how we do that. So it was a very good meeting, a lot of information exchanged between the regulators and the licensee holders, and the CNSC themselves were quite pleased with how well things were working.
Was there any valuable input from the licensee holders in terms of the regulators and saying changes that they want to see, or? Yeah,
there's a few things, like primarily is communication between the authorized inspection agency and the licensee holders and the CNSC. Because the AIA, like TSSA, is on contract with Bruce Power and OPG and AECL. So there's no hard link with CNSC anymore. So we used to be contracted by CNSC, and that way had some good attributes of communication between us and CNSC. So we talked about that to see how we can improve communication between the three elements in the triangle.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So I was always looking for ways for improvement.
Yeah. And you also met with the Canadian
Boiler and Machinery Underwriters Association. These are all the insurers who perform the vast majority of periodic inspections in Ontario. So I usually attend their quarterly meetings, and one of the current initiatives that we're proceeding with is, right now, the National Board, which is they certify all the insurers and all of the boiler inspectors in North America. They have a program what they call the Violations Tracking Report, which what they call violations, we call non-conformances. It's where we find, when we do an inspection, we find something wrong with the device or the plant, and we issue an order. The insurers, they issue recommendations because they don't have the legal authority to issue orders, so they call them recommendations. So right now we do this all independently. The National Board, they have about 34 jurisdictions in North America that participate and share their non-conformance or their violations information with the National Board every quarter, and then the National Board compiles them and makes available a report showing what are the main contributors to the violations that the 34 jurisdictions are finding. Now, for comparison, BPV does maybe around 500 periodic inspections a year. Last year, the National Board did well over 700,000 inspections.
They have a much broader scope.
That's
mind
right.
you, but-
And that gives a lot more credibility to the data that they're getting from those non-violations reports. Now, the good news is when we compare our data, TSA data, with the National Board data, our numbers are almost identical. Our compliance rate is around 95%. The National Board's compliance rate is the mid to low 90s. So that's very good correlation.
And they're finding the same challenges, right?
Yes. Our highest frequency for violation or non-conformance is missing C of I, Certificate of Inspection. And that's what the National Board finds also. The second one is expired safety valve issues, like they haven't been serviced or it hasn't been recorded properly that they have been serviced within 5 years. And it's very similar to what the National Board finds out. So that's very reassuring.
So those are more on the administrative side rather than on the service side or the technical side?
It covers all of it because like it's the reporting on the actual state of what they find when the periodic inspections are done, and what we're doing right now is we're mapping our non-conformances, our standard orders, with the National Board violations categories, so that we can do a one-for-one comparison. And to make things even more interesting, I proposed with our insurer partners that if they also map their recommendations to the National Board violation categories, and then in the fullness of time, what we're looking at is to be able to get that information from the insurers, add it to our information, and then share it with the National Board. So that way, the National Board, they do 34 jurisdictions. I would like Ontario to join them and make 35 jurisdictions so that we would be able to have a direct comparison of our inspection results from all inspections, not just TSA, but all the insurers also. And then we'll be able to do a comparison between the Ontario results and the rest of the jurisdictions, and to see if there's any trends that we want to keep an eye on. So we'll have a much better data source for doing any analysis of what's going on in the BPV field.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's a promising opportunity, and I think it's going to work.
Fantastic. Well, again, a lot on the go, but a sharp eye on safety
Yes.
throughout the province and nationally.
Yes,
So,
for sure.
thanks again for being with us today, Mike.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Stay tuned for more TSA safety matters.